everybody. Welcome to another episode of OTA on the Air. With me today is Lewie Pugh, who's the Executive Vice President of OOIDA. So, Lewie, welcome to the show with us today, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure to be on your show today.
Well, tell us, even though most of our listeners probably know about OOIDA, but tell us a little bit and give us a little brief overview of your organization.
Yes, of course. The Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association is what OOIDA stands for. We're an international trade association, and we represent the interests of independent owner-operators and professional drivers on pretty much all issues related to government. Advocacy is our thing. We have more than 150,000 members across the country in all 50 states and Canada. And collectively, it's pretty interesting, about 240,000 trucks between individual owner operators and small fleets. And as far as Ohio, where I'm from originally as well, we have about little over 6,600 members. I just looked this morning in the state of Ohio.
And you also have a couple of your board members are from Ohio too, if I remember right.
We actually have two full board members. Monty Wiederholt, who has a small fleet. He's from southwestern Ohio. I'm sorry. He's down by Lebanon. And then we also have another man, John Kogelman, who is was an owner operator. He's now just a driver. He lives up by Lorraine. And then we also have an alternate from Maryville, Carl Smith, which is a one truck leased operator. He's leased to, I think, Montgomery Tanker. Well, it used to be Montgomery Quality Carriers, pulls a tanker. So actually, we have three, I guess you would say.
Well, it's good to have the Ohio connection with us today then.
And as executive vice president, I'm an Ohio member.
Right. Well, yeah, and that's something unique about OOIDA is your board members, and even in positions like yours, that they have to have one point in time been an active driver.
Yeah, that is correct. The way our association was started back in 1973 by a group of drivers. As Jim, our past president, used to say, they all thought they could get together, go down to Washington, say how they feel during the oil embargoes about high fuel and regulations and all this stuff. They would go down, be heard on Capitol Hill. The government would do what they asked, fix everything, and they could all go back to trucking. Well, here we are almost 50 years later, and we're still fighting some of the same fights we were back then. But in answer to your question, that is correct. Since we were started by drivers, that's part of our bylaws. To be on the board, to qualify, you have to be actually driving truck, be a truck driver. You don't have to be an owner operator, just a driver. To be on the board of directors, then you have to be a member for it's 5 years continuous to qualify. And then they go through a vetting process and run, and then they're elected by the general membership as alternates. And then as you serve as an alternate, you may be elected to the full board, which the alternates are a 2-year term, the full board's a 4-year term. And then carry that on farther to be an executive like myself, Todd, Bob Essler, Leo Wilkins, and Terry Buttons, which is our execs. You have to be on the board for 5 years continuously as well as a full board member. So yeah, and our board guides our association with our advocacy and stuff like that, and we have meetings a couple times a year here in Green Valley, Missouri. So, yes, I'm proud of that. I know Todd and Jim was proud of that. Todd's proud of that. Our board's proud of that. When we can say, we are governed by truckers.
Yeah. When I first started here at the Ohio Trucking Association, one of the first people I met on Capitol Hill was Jim, and he ended up being a very good friend of mine and very much missed by the industry. Great guy.
Yes, very much so. We miss him around here.
Let's dive right in. So, what looks to be the second priority of the administration behind COVID, the infrastructure package seems to be front and center. I guess, what is OOIDA doing to prepare for the new highway bill?
Well, like a lot of others, we're hoping for the best and preparing for the worst, I guess you could say. I mean, what we would like to see is an infrastructure without a lot of stuff to hinder trucking. It seems like we get something good, but we get 3 things bad what goes along with that. So we're hoping for some truck parking. We've had a bill in the past, which, maybe we get in that later, but we're hoping to see truck parking without a bunch of stuff added in there, such as, tolling, increasing or expanding tolling and where tolls can be put. Um, money increases for like mix app. And the last one we saw was like a 40% jump. We understand that government agencies may need a little more money as time goes by, but let's do it intelligently, not just throw a whole bunch of money at a problem. We'd like to see training hours and entry level driving training, of course. We're concerned with hours of service may come back into play again, after what we all just went through a year and a half ago. We're concerned with the sleep apnea, CSA, what they're going to do with that, AEBs, underrides, and insurance minimums. So, long and short, we're, like I said, we're preparing for the worst case scenario, but hoping for the best.
Yeah, and we had just an issue popped up yesterday that we had briefly talked about via email today was the issue of truck only VMT is being considered by the Senate Finance Committee, as we're hearing, as a potential pay for or potential option to pay for the highway bill. I guess where does OOIDA stand on that, and give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think OOIDA stands probably in the same position most of your members, if not all. I know we're well in line with ATA and their feelings on this. We're tired of truckers being the only ones that pay more than their fair share. I mean, again, it's always easier to put regulations on little groups instead of the whole masses. But everybody uses the road. Truckers already are paying their fair share. The people that are not paying highway fuel taxes right now, in the majority, and I'm not saying in all cases, but in the majority right now, are passenger vehicles because they get such better fuel mileage. We're seeing a lot of move to hybrids, possibly electric. Yes, that's happening in trucking a little bit, but not in the masses that it is in the private sector. So I think before we start making truckers who are already paying their fair share, not only with fuel taxes, which again, we've never been opposed to that, a fair, equitable increase in fuel taxes to the Highway Trust Fund, because we know it's been broke forever, it seems like. But with that being said, before we go after truckers, let's look at the people that are already not paying their fair share in these electric cars and stuff like that. I mean, because people forget truckers are paying for via fuel tax, FVT, heavy use tax. I think some plating permit money goes in there. And then there's some stuff that doesn't get into the Highway Trust Fund, like UCR. So truckers are definitely paying their fair share to take care of the highways. And then when you go adding tolls in on some of these toll roads and what that costs, and as you're well aware, we have, and with ATA, they have their battle with Rhode Island on the truck only tolls, and we're fighting with Indiana on increasing tolls on just trucks. We're tired of that. Let's everybody uses it, so everybody should pay their fair proportion.
Yeah, and I guess they've always couched it as a pilot project, and they always use trucking as the pilot project. And I've always argued that the electric vehicles would be a great pilot project because they have the same technologies that we do with GPS tracking and all of that pieces that are part of it. So yeah, it's amazing that we always seem to be the target of all these great ideas that come up.
Yeah, and if I can add on to that, I mean, I know it's rumored that, well, now truckers, it's real easy because we got ELDs. Well, first, not all truckers have ELDs. Not all trucks have ELDs.
Right.
And secondly, it's law that all that ELD is to be is a tracking device for hours of service. They're not to be using that information for anything else. Now, of course, the government can always change the rules on us as they like to, but I agree with you. It gets really old being guinea pigs as a trucker, with trucks.
Yeah, it's truly amazing how they can change the rules whenever they want to make it fit what they need. So
Yeah, and I mean, I admittedly don't know a lot about charging electric cars, but it seems to me I see these pumps all over the country. Seems to me there'd be a way they could put something, an attachment on that, or if you have a plug at your house, to where they could collect money just like they do for fuel tax when you buy fuel and put it, out there for you, and charge them right at the pump, because we know that works. It's very easy collected. It's hard to cheat on. Once again, the government wants to create a whole new bureaucracy, in my opinion. I'm not in favor of that.
So one thing that came up on our board meeting call this week, as well as in Transport Topics, they published an article about a Wisconsin carrier who was charged $202,000 for a tow. How has OOIDA seen the impact of towing bills on the industry, and what are some things that you're looking at doing to address this problem?
Yeah, this towing thing for let's and just to clear it right in the beginning, non-consensual tows. That's where the problem is. Because your truck, for those who don't know, and probably most do, but you never know who's watching. For those who don't know, when you have an accident out there on the highway, whether it's your truck's fault, car's fault, or there's an accident, highway patrol's first and foremost thing is to get out there and get the road clear to get traffic flowing, which makes complete sense. So they have a list. They call a tower, whoever's next up on their list. As a driver, you don't get to shop, you don't get to negotiate price, nothing. This guy comes out, hooks onto your tractor trailer, and takes your truck. So, with that being that, which is fine, we understand that, and we have nothing against that. The problem is some people never let a crisis go to waste. I guess we've heard said over and over in many things, and I mean, we have seen towing bills in here for rollovers and stuff as high as $250,000, $300,000. I heard there was just one the other day in New Jersey with 300 and some.
Nice.
Some of these bills we have challenged a little bit. A lot of them are in six figures. There was one in Missouri I just saw it the other day. It was $24,000. It was a rollover. They were there 4.5 hours. Charged them 24,000, so a little over $6,000 an hour for this record to be out there, or a little less, I guess I should say. But we see this stuff all the time. And unfortunately, most states, there's not even anywhere that anybody oversees this. There's nothing you can do. There's no consumer protection laws in most states for a trucker and a non-consensual tow. So we've been working with state associations, Colorado, Wyoming, Texas, West Virginia, Louisiana, and Missouri to work on some towing reform and to get some sort of a consumer protection for truckers. In fact, just last week, myself and Mike Matuzik, which I know he's our head of government affairs, we were in Jeff City, capital here in Missouri, and they testifying on HB 389, which is a bill introduced for just to set up a panel, and this is we call it legislation or regulatory light, I guess, or legislation light. We don't want to be setting prices or anything like that. We want, if you get a non-consensual tow, this bill will get, and you think that it's unfair, like the one we saw for $24,000, you can take it to this board, this independent board. They can look over the bill. If they agree that it's wrong, there's really, what they do is that towing company will be removed from the rotation. They can no longer do non-consensual tows from highway patrol. We've seen this play out in a couple of states. I think Tennessee was one, and Mike's better on this than I am. I think maybe Arkansas, but we've seen this play out in a couple of states, and we've had a couple, like right in the beginning, that's pushed it. They've gotten right, and it just sort of cleaned itself up on their own. And I would like to also, give my hats off to Missouri Trucking Association. They were in Jeff City with us as well, backing this bill and trying to, when we testified last week at the House level.
Well, my favorite line of that article was the quote from the tower who said that this was their first offer in the negotiation. It wasn't, they throw these bills out, see who will pay them, and then they negotiate back down instead of pricing it appropriately from the start. So yeah, you can definitely, the Ohio Trucking Association is taking a very deep dive into this moving forward to see what we can do to rectify this. Because yeah, like you said, it's getting just to be out of control, completely out of control.
I'm sure if there's anything you need from us or from Mike Matuzik, Mike is the guru on towing. I tease him about. He's a guru on non-consensual tow. He would be more than happy to help you. And yeah, it was kind of last week. There was somebody there from the Towing Association of Missouri, and one of that bill I was telling you, the 24,000, we had turned those over as evidence, and one of the representatives just asked him straight out, "Can you explain to me how you can come up with this $24,000 for 4.5 hours. I just can't wrap my head around anything costing that much money, on the side of the road for 4.5 hours. And they didn't really have, all he could say was, well, I just have to see the bill or no more about it.
Yeah, I had that same conversation at the State House last week with a tower about that, and he said, well, it just depends on all that, and I'm like, no, it doesn't depend. This, full well, 60, 80, $100,000 bills are out of control. So
And just finally, there's a lot of good towers companies out there. I mean, we get a lot of support from other people in the other towing companies in the towing industry because these bad actors hurt their business and hurt them as well. So this isn't like a trucking attacking towing, just by standalone. And I'm sure you see that in Ohio. In fact, I know we have a tower in Ohio that's pretty interested in this and cleaning up the towing business. A lot of towing companies are on board with this as well.
yeah, I agree. I agree that they're just trying to weed out the bad actors who end up on the list.
Right.
So we talked a little bit about the new administration, but I think one of the biggest fears of the new administration is a potential of increasing the insurance minimums and what the impact that will have on the industry. And you touched on that a little bit on the start, but I guess talk to us a little bit about your position and what you feel will happen in that negotiation.
Well, I mean, they put it in the last year. We've heard rumblings of this over the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, as far as OOIDA stands, we're not in favor of it at all. There's no correlation anywhere where raising insurance minimums have ever improved safety. What they do is they improve the bottom line of trial attorneys, in our opinion, if you really want to be honest about it. I
I'm
mean,
there too. Yeah, don't be afraid to say
yeah,
it.
I mean, when you drive around America, I mean, when I drive from Kansas City back to Ohio, it's amazing to me the amount of billboards, especially over in Indiana, for attorneys that make their living suing truckers and trucking companies. And it's a shame. And there's a few attorneys in Congress now in DC that they've gotten their money that way over time. And they seem to be ones pushing this agenda. And a lot of people kind of give us a hard time because we do offer insurance to our members. It's a service. We have services, but by doing that, we definitely see the cost. We definitely have the insight on the down and dirty of what the trial attorneys will do and try to do, and because we fight it firsthand. But the increase on, as and your listeners know, and anybody's in trucking business, this isn't a big profit industry by any means. I always have said, from owning a truck and being an owner operator for 20 plus years myself, trucking is a penny saved business, not a penny made business. And we see, if they go to it could be 5 to 15% increases easily, if not way more, in their primary liability. Primary liability is doing nothing but going up year after year after year as it is, accidents. But when it gets down to it, and why we are so adamant against this, for one, not only is there's no correlation safety, but FMCSA's own study with Volpe showed that most accidents were covered, or 99.4% of all accidents were covered by the minimums that are set in place. The average accident's only 18,000 some dollars. Most trucks, we only have to carry 750,000. Most people are carrying 1 million. And of course, we always hear, well, why can't we just raise it to 1 million? Again, 750,000 is taking care of 99.4% of all the people it affects. I don't know too many bills or laws or rules that's ever come out of Washington, D.C., where they took care of 99.4% of the problem. And finally, that's $750,000, which was come up with, back in the early 80s, because we hear that all the time. Well, inflation, you got to go up with inflation. That number, there was no science to that number. That was just an arbitrary number pulled out of the sky back in, when all this came into place, that you had to have 750. So they didn't even do any research. So I would say we were probably way overpaying for the last 25 to 30 years if you really want to put everything into perspective.
Right. And yeah, that's a great point, is that when you take a look at the vast majority of claims, 99.4%, that the insurance limits are already covering those. And that's probably because the trial lawyers know what that number is, and that's what they make sure they sue for $1 less than that to, get as much as they can out of the deal, and knowing insurance is going to cover it. And you're right, all this is going to do is make insurance prices go up, premiums go up, and we're already having trouble. We're already seeing a lot of smaller carriers that are seeing insurance costs that they can't afford, and it's just going to make the insurance market just so unaffordable for most companies, especially those smaller trucking companies that, like 55% of our membership has less than 10 trucks. So
Right. Yeah,
that's,
exactly.
that make that dollars, like you said, that's a dollar saved, or sorry, penny saved kind of scenario. That means a lot of money to them, and it means their livelihood.
Oh yeah, exactly. And I, and I'm not taking pot shots at anybody, but I don't understand because I see some big carriers that are for this, and I'm sure that's capitalistic market, and I'm an open market capitalist guy. I mean, you drive the competition out. Maybe that's part of the reason. It's just I don't understand that with them either because everybody has accidents, and my fear would be no matter what size carrier I am, somewhere somehow this is going to circle back to me somewhere along the way. Maybe I put some people, and I'm not saying that's their reason, but if my reason is to put people out of business, I put them out. I'm still going to have accidents. I'm going to be the guy that's left getting sued. So, and again, maybe that's not all their reasoning, but that's just as a trucker, something that's the way I kind of picture it. I just don't completely understand that mind thought. You know.
So Ohio is right now in the process of redoing their federal freight plan, and one of the big key areas that they're working on is truck parking, which you had talked about earlier. I guess, what are you hearing from your members as far as truck parking and its availability, and how much of a growing problem is this?
Well, I mean, truck parking is a crisis in my opinion, in our opinion at OOIDA. I mean, we just saw a study, and I don't know if it was with Atri or who it was with. I can't remember, but I saw it the other day. That's the number one problem for truckers. That's the number one thing that drivers are concerned about. The only disheartening thing was carriers didn't even have it on the list. But with that being on their top 10 things, but with that being said, yeah, I mean, trucking, I mean, I've only been off the road 3.5 years. Trucking was hard for me. I trucked out of southeastern Ohio. I spent most of my career going to the East Coast, New York City, Baltimore, up into New England. Parking's a premium affair. Um, I've fought a little bit in Ohio when I was living there and trucking there over on Interstate 77 above New Philadelphia, Dover, Ohio. They closed that rest area to put in an exit ramp. We were promised that the way station up above by Bolivar would be turned into truck parking. Well, they didn't do that either. They closed and they put barricades. Now, unless it's changed, I haven't been up through there for a couple years because I don't get that way when I go back home much. But unless it's changed, all it's being used for now, because the way station was closed, was a place for a speed cop to get you off that hill for truckers on a speed trap, or somewhere for DOT to pull you in to inspect your truck. But we can't sleep there, which is really disheartening. And this is not only a problem in Ohio or the East Coast, it's a problem nationwide for truckers. And I tell everybody, I've been on the board at OOIDA for almost going on 17 years now. First time I ever went to DC as a truck driver back in 2005 was for parking. I've been going to DC, it seems like every year or two, and attending meetings when I was a driver ever since then, and now more. I'm sure you're well aware, and your members last year, we, along with Congressman Boston Angie Craig, introduced a federal bill called the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act, which the number was great. It was HR 6104, so it had a good trucker ring to it. And that was to reserve 750 million over 5 years, and it was going to be a competitive bid system for states, and it was to put pavement down for real parking. It could be worked with truck stops and others, and it would be free for drivers and members. And we really hope to try to get that through last year. We didn't. We are going to reintroduce it this year. I think ATA is going to sign and help push that along with us. So, that's something that it's coming out again, same sort of particulars. We really want it, and what the thing I stress the most, it's for real parking, not just those electric signs that tell you that there isn't any parking, which you already know that there isn't anyway.
Right.
If you've been on the road for any time at all as a trucker.
Well, and
So,
that's so, yeah. So during the transportation bill, which is going on here in Ohio right now, this has been one of our top issues. We've talked about it with everyone we're at, and really what our purpose is for that is that we want to prepare the legislature to understand that this is an asphalt problem, that this is a pavement problem, that we need actual spots on the road or off the road where we can safely park and spend the night. And so that's something that we have done. And in fact, the Senate amendments just came out today, and we found out that the Senate put in a provision to reopen to tell DOT to reopen any of the closed way stations for commercial truck parking only. So we are making some strides in there, but yeah, we're a long ways from where we need to be.
well, that's good. I'll be sure to call my elected representatives in Ohio and help you push this along.
That's good.
Uh,
We know him. We know him.
With that being said, though, I'm glad to hear that you guys are working on that. I think that sometimes state associations, that's not one of their priorities because, if you're a carrier from Ohio, and which Ohio is a little different because we have a lot of intrastate work in Ohio, as I know you well aware. I mean, a lot of steel and stuff. You never even leave the state, so guys need parking. But it seems like a lot of this, and this is where I tell members, it's hard. You, as a member of OOIDA, you need to call your state for your state parking because even though it doesn't affect you, because normally parking in where you're from, it really isn't a hard thing. It's when, where it's hardest for the guy from Pennsylvania or the guy from Illinois that's coming into Ohio or going into Missouri or some other state. And that's where, I'm glad to hear that you guys are drinking that. And I would encourage more state associations to push that message, even though maybe it doesn't. I look at it this way. It may not directly affect your members for parking, but it definitely directly reflects to the safety of your members because guys from other places and other states, they need a safe place to rest, just like your guys need a safe place to rest where they're going.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
and I would also like to add, and I know some carriers do, but I think to really help push this across the ball, we need to get some more carrier involvement and get carriers pushing to their state. Like I said with state associations, same thing. Carriers need to be reaching out to their state governments and stuff, because carriers pay a lot of taxes. But the bigger the carrier is, the more taxes they pay, the more this is a problem our entire industry shares. And as an entire industry, this is something we need to fix together. And I guess that survey I mentioned, it was a little disheartening to see that, drivers, that's their number one problem. It didn't even make the carrier list. And again, I'm not picking on carriers because I understand they're coming from another thing, but it does affect carriers. It affects the safety of the guy you got in your truck and it affects the safety of all the people around your truck.
So obviously, in the United States, we have an aging workforce. The driver's average age is up in the 50-55 range. With all these drivers either retiring or moving on, I guess what is OOIDA's strategy to grow the owner operators to meet the needs of the freight volumes that we have coming forward?
Boy, that's it's, hey, you're right, completely. And I know that your members and us and we all are struggling with what do we do? Young people don't want to drive truck anymore. I mean, young kids don't. I mean, I joke about it, but it's honestly the true fact. Kids don't grow up like I did. I saw Smokey and the Bandit. From the time I saw Smokey and the Bandit, all I ever wanted to do was drive a truck. They left a lot out in that movie, I always say. but but that's what made me want to drive a truck. And I get it, it's a tough life, you're away from home a lot and stuff like that. I mean, I think the first thing, as OIDA, we're always trying to work for better working conditions for these guys, safer, better. you know we need that. We need to get FMCSA, DOT, and people like that to start listening to what drivers are, need, want. You know, I like the past administrations we had, and we're waiting to see what happens with the new one. But FMCSA got really open to truckers. They listened to ATA, they listened to OIDA, they started listening to these groups. They had regular truckers. We had all these hearings at truck shows where real truckers really are. People that do this truck, and we need more of that. Um, Definitely, we need to see better pay. I think carriers and people are starting to realize that we need to get the shipping community to realize that drivers' time is worth something. For far too, I can say it myself. I've said it. Weirton Steel in Wilton, West Virginia, longer waiting to load a steel coil than what it took me to drive to St. Louis to deliver it for nothing. We've got to start addressing these problems. Again, carriers need to educate their shippers, educate their receivers. You know, I know it's probably not popular with everybody. I think the Fair Labor Standards Act stuff needs to be addressed. Truckers shouldn't be exempt from overtime. You want to make the road safe. If you pay people for their time, they're probably going to get a little bit safer. We need to find out respect. I mean, I remember growing up, more so previous to me, but truckers were the white knights of the highway. And I don't think truckers are the reason that they're not anymore. I don't blame that on drivers. Grant every industry has a few bad eggs, but we need to figure out how to promote trucking better. And that's OOIDA's job, that's ATA's job, that's state associations. I always, when I'm in Washington or wherever talking to elected officials, I always remind these people, these are just men and women out there trying to make a living, support their families. The last thing anybody wants to do is get up in the morning and hurt anybody or cause a problem. They want to do their job. Truckers are hard-working blue-collar people. They want to do their job. They want to be paid fairly, treated correctly, and come home and spend the rest of their time with their family. And they understand more than anyone how dangerous it is out on the road, how dangerous their job is. And that's where I really get upset because people just act like truckers are, don't matter, that there's not even a real person in that truck. We talk about everyone else's lives, and I don't take away from that. Everybody's like, but their lives are important too.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we've been talking a lot about with texting and driving legislation is that this is the driver's workplace, and we would not stand for unsafe workplaces in other environments. But somehow, we're more than willing to allow people to text and drive without any penalties associated with it, and and put our drivers in harm's way. And I say the exact same thing you do, that they're just trying to make an honest living and go home safely to their family. There's really no more noble cause than that.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's terrible. And this kind of goes for everything we've talked about today. It's just terrible to me. And I brought this up at a hearing a month or so ago. A year ago, a little less than a year ago now, because I guess the whole COVID thing started about a year ago. So, let's say 10 months ago, truckers were being hailed by Congress and elected officials as heroes. And, they're out there delivering all this stuff and keeping America open and providing first responders with what they need. But yet we can't figure out how to get them vaccine. We couldn't figure out what to do with them if they got COVID or how to even test these guys. And now that this is kind of over with, we've kind of forgotten about all that. And we want to introduce all this legislation, all these regulations on them and put it right back where we were a year ago from now. That would probably be the year. And it's deplorable to me. And as somebody who did the job and understands the job and how hard it is, all I want to do is make a good living. I don't want to be rich. I just want to make a good living and be treated fairly. And I think that's all what drivers get. And unfortunately, they're treated like second-class citizens by government, sometimes by the company they work for, by the shipper, by the receiver, by the law enforcement on the side of the road. It's like these guys and ladies never get a break.
Yeah, and that's one thing when I drove was you got to see that firsthand. You got and you got to see outside of how they're treated, and the fact that they stop at a shipper or receiver and can't even have access to a bathroom is truly just amazing to me, that they just don't have that opportunity. It's just
I always had $1 for every time a ship or receiver, more so than a shipper, yelled at me for bringing them something like it's my fault. I didn't order your stuff.
right.
Or you go in to deliver and you're like, what do you want? And what's maybe some few descriptive adjectives. It's like, I'm just doing my job, man. All I did is from point A to point B.
Right. Well, Lewie, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us and talk with us on OTA on the air, and looking forward to being able to have a time where we can actually meet up together and chat a little more.
Yeah, that's great. It's great talking to you, Tom, and I hope everything's good back in Ohio. I'll be home here in a couple weeks to see the Easter Bunny. So, but hey, thanks for having us. Anytime you want to talk, let me know. Appreciate it. And same here. Looking forward to meeting face to face.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.